Are you a landscape designer curious about replacing your traditional tools with an iPad? In this mini course, you'll discover everything you need to know about working on residential projects. I'm Henry Gao, and I help architects and designers make the leap from traditional hand drawing methods to digital sketching on the iPad. And in this workshop, you'll learn how to start a project from scratch, whether it's working from an existing PDF or a photo, so you can plan, edit, and refine your design effortlessly. Coloring techniques that replicates the classic look of pencil and markers. How to create stencils to save time on repetitive drawing tasks. And finally, adding custom title blocks to build a complete drawing set directly on the iPad. No computer drafting required. Plus, all the resources mentioned in the workshop, like the plant library, texture paper, and case study files, are available for free in the link below. Let's get started. When you're working on the iPad, you might be working with PDFs, you might be working with maybe a photo or a survey or a scanned version of the site or the building. So I want to show you a couple ways to bring that into Morphology Trace. This might be from the engineer, architect, or surveyor. The easiest way to bring this in is using the custom option for the starting a project window. A lot of people get this wrong actually. They see the PDF icon and they automatically click on that. But I'll show you why this is easier to use this custom. So most likely that's coming from a CAD software. It has the paper size already kind of embedded in there. It has a scale. So I'm gonna go ahead on this custom section, and I've loaded my files to cloud. So I personally use Dropbox, and you can favorite your Dropbox folder into your iPad file app. So the file that we'll be looking at and we'll be loading in here is called this as built plan. And this actually is a drawing set. It's an architectural drawing set exactly. So you'll see when I click on this, the option that I am prompted to select right now is the scale. So the PDF actually contains multiple pages, and most of the pages are in 1/4 inch scale. It's a residential project, and there's like 1 or 2 pages that's not in that scale because it's a site plan. So for the sake of just calibrating a PDF, I'm going to calibrate the entire PDF just for one scale only. So I'm going to select this 1/4 inch scale just to fire up this PDF, and it'll only take a second. As you can see, this is a multi-page PDF. This PDF has a site plan, it has the roof plan, it has a floor plan, and a bunch of elevations. Because we brought this in calibrated to scale. So let's take a look at this room dimension, and let's now pull up our ruler tool. They call this the super scale ruler, and we can tell this inside dimension from end to end is 14.6, and you can see our ruler is approximately 14 foot and 6 inches. So this tells me that this file was brought in correctly and it's currently calibrated to scale. So you're actually drawing 1:1. So this is the general idea is if you have a file like this could easily be a garden plan if it has a scale embedded in the PDF. And this to me is the easiest way to bring in a PDF to scale. I'm going to show you 2 other ways to bring it in if the PDF isn't to scale, or if it's just the image, or if it's a photo or a drone photo, something like that. But again, when you are importing a PDF from an architect or engineer, this should be an option to you. Another way to bring in a drawing, let's say it's just a PDF, but it doesn't have the built-in scale embedded in there or the paper size. So we're gonna just look at this file. So I'm gonna bring this drawing in. I don't have to use the custom option because I don't actually need to assign a scale to that. I'm gonna show you what this PDF that I am planning on bringing in right now looks like. This is actually a student project that I've recently helped with. She's used to doing everything on the computer herself. She's doing the layout, she's doing the CADing, her drafting, and she's used to exporting everything on the computer. I taught her to transition everything that she could do from AutoCAD completely to Morphology Trace, from doing the same thing, from doing the layout, design, rendering, to exporting and sharing. So I just essentially took her background and I showed her the process that I'm going to be using. So this is a PDF. It doesn't have any scale to it. It has a legend here that we can use to calibrate based off. So that's what I'm going to use. This method will involve calibrating using a set dimension that we know of. So we don't have to use the custom option now because it doesn't have these embedded settings. We can use just the regular PDF, and this might be what you've been used to using. So when I do bring this PDF in. Let's go ahead and find, I believe it's this file right here. So I'm going to click the PDF and now it's going to fire up in Morphola Trace. So if I just pull up my ruler right now, this is scaleless, right? So we're going to calibrate based on this legend right here. Ideally, you would want to calibrate based on a longer dimension. So let's say if you have the dimension from one end of the property map to the other end, that's a lot more accurate and ideal. So we're going to use the calibration tool and we're going to select both end of this PDF and I'll just try to get it as accurately as I can to both ends. And that's 20 feet. So I'm gonna type in 20 feet and I'm gonna hit on this check mark right here. Okay, so now this calibration, you can see the scale was set. And now if we pull up this ruler, we can see that from one end to the other end is exactly 20 feet. So this will work for a photo, will work for a scanned PDF. Like a lot of drawings from 10, 20 years ago, they're just scanned PDFs of the actual pencil drawings. So it won't have those scale factor built into it. So this is method number 2. And I'm gonna show you one more. And this method is very similar to how we've used to calibrate this drawing. We'll use the custom here and let's just find it. This is actually a photo. You know, if you have a photo, if you have a drone photo, if you got a photo from Google Maps or Earth or somewhere, this might be helpful for you. So I'm going to ignore the paper size and the screen because it's just a photo here. And I'm just gonna select the settings that doesn't really matter. So this is if I just turn off this layer, this is a drone photo that I got from Apple Maps. In some situations, you may want to work with a site plan while you're waiting for certain things to come in, like a survey. So you can also use the method of manually calibrating based on a known dimension. If this is the length of the house, I could as easily just assign 2 ends of that house. So let's say that is 150 feet and we're going to calibrate based on this. And this is calibrated based on this side of the house. So you can pull up the ruler now and you can kind of approximate the rest of the property or the site or the land based on this length. You can do this with not just plants, you can do this for elevations too. So for example, like the elevation of a house or a building, or just if it's elevation of a street. Granted, it's fairly level and the elevation can be extrapolated using this method. If you're using a door to calibrate, hopefully it's a longer dimension that you're using to calibrate, but this is a very useful feature nonetheless. Next, I kind of want to show you some of the features that I think will be really useful to you as a landscape designer. I'll show you what I think are top 5 features and workflows that I think all landscape designers should be using today. So first one is, this is the file that we just calibrated and we brought it into Morphola Trace. So the next thing I would personally do is actually just to enable the grid option. Think of it as you're actually using a gridded paper on a clipboard, which many of you probably have done in the past. So this is that same idea, except now because your drawing is calibrated, you can enable a gridded paper and assign a predetermined unit to each of the squares. So for example, I have just turned it on and I'm going to set each grid to be 1 foot in length. And I do this for my architecture drawings. So 1 foot seems to be good, you know, visually, because you can quickly count the number of squares and then you can identify the length to when I'm drawing furniture. And I imagine this will be the case for you as a landscape designer too. So I'm going to actually make it into a different color just so that, I don't know, visually it's clear that this is a grid and it's not interfering with anything else. I will probably dial down the opacity a little bit. Once I dialed it to a point where I'm comfortable enough seeing it as a visual guide, I can also see the actual background. The second thing I want to tell you, and you've seen so far, is this visual scale ruler, right? So as long as your drawing is calibrated to scale, this scale ruler will contract and expand based on the extent of your zoom. So if I zoom really close, and hopefully you can still see the grid, you can see each grid is 1 foot, right? So you can literally count the number of grids to get a sense of the length of something, or you can use this ruler to get a really precise measurement. Or if you are working with extreme precision, you can zoom in to the point where you can get it down to an inch or half an inch. This is more useful in cabinetry design where you're getting to that level of precision. But I think just overall, when we're drawing and we're using Morpholo Trace as our paper and trace paper replacement, getting to that level of precision is not ideal. We're sketching here. We don't need to get down to like a 1-inch increment, even though that's possible. And I think working with students, I see this often. Just because this is available to you, it doesn't mean you should be that precise when you're drawing. And it's actually a little bit counterproductive when you're getting to that level of precision. So personally, if I can get it down to like 1 inch or 2 inch when I'm sketching very quickly, that is more than enough. And I'll come back to it maybe at a later point if I do want to get more precise. So I do want to just make a note of that because I see over and over again. So don't get caught up on the precision. That's what I'm trying to say. The third tool that you'll find really useful is actually an area takeoff. You can use it for a number of different things. You can use it for area takeoff. You can use it to putting a material pattern. But for now, I'll show you like if I wanted to find the area of something very quickly. So let's say that's the area of this paver, right? This paver path. There's a area tool right here that if I click on this polygon, I can go ahead and roughly make the shape of this paver path. So if I just do one more point and then select, this is going to highlight this path and it's going to tell you that approximately this is 138.8 square feet. And you can either color this in or you can actually give it a different pattern. So when you're putting on patterns, you can put a pattern on this. If it's a brick pattern, you don't want to draw a brick pattern, you can just put a pattern on here. And I know when we're doing this kind of calculation, it's quick. So keep in mind like your typical overage when you're estimating based off on a drawing. This is definitely less precise than AutoCAD. You're within 5% margin if you're using this method to get a quick takeoff, which is still really, really good. Imagine trying to get this on a trace paper. That's nearly impossible in my opinion. So that's another feature that I think everyone can benefit from. And then in terms of just planning your drawings, the student I was working with here, right, she did all her layouts. You can see the circular tools. The tool that's available to us in Morpholo Trace is actually, there is a circular tool that you can set the radius and the diameter simply by just entering into this field right here. So if I am space planning or garden planning, I can set this to a 5-foot diameter and then I'm gonna just click off and you can see I can move this circle around. It looks like the base drawing is a little bit bigger. Just for the sake of demonstration, let's stick with 5 and I can actually, if I don't lock it, this circle will actually retract and the actual diameter will be reflected as you zoom or contract. So again, looks like 6 foot is about right in here. So I'm actually going to just use 6 foot in here and I'm going to lock it. So on this trace paper that comes with the base layer, what I'll do is maybe I'll just select a pencil and I'll use my red color. I'm just going to do that as I am pretending I'm doing these layouts one by one. If you just want to replicate or do a lot of the plan layout in the same size, what I can do is I'm going to make one just off to the page because that's the one I'm going to be using to duplicate. So here I've actually selected this and then I'm going to duplicate it as many times. Actually, this will be helpful if I had a center, right? So I'm going to duplicate it as many times as I need around, for example, this project around the boundaries of the property line. And you can do this for any size, any diameter, and you can quickly do this. And then you can always go back and erase something. Now, the last thing that I think will be very helpful for everyone to understand and to use is the stencil tool. So Morpholo Trace comes with their own stencil. They've developed the stencils that you can use for free. From the standpoint of a professional, actually, I would say this is not as comprehensive as or robust of a library that's actually useful. And you can see even here, the ones that you can use, it's like there's a couple, right? You probably have your own library. You probably have hundreds of these that need to be specified in your own way. So this is not very abundant in the first place. And I'll show you how to make a better use of this later on, including making your own stencils. So these are the stencils that I developed myself, and I'll show you that towards the end of this. But I do want to highlight this stencil feature because it's there. It can be very powerful, but you have to do a little bit of legwork if you want to use it for yourself. Okay. Features alone doesn't really help you if you don't know how to incorporate them into a workflow. So I'm going to show you some workflow ideas, some very basic and fundamental workflow ideas that you really need to understand to really take advantage of the Morpholo Trace app. The first one is really just the idea of drawing one-to-one on the Morpholo Trace app, because once you've calibrated your drawing, you're really using this dynamic scale ruler to draw one-to-one. And this is the same idea if you're using AutoCAD. You're literally drafting one-to-one, you're putting down 20 feet, and then a 20 feet line comes out, right? So this is the similar principle where you're drawing one-to-one on paper. But what I saw and experienced are a lot of students got hung up on creating a specific paper size and a scale before they started drawing. Maybe in their mind, they had this idea that, oh, my ultimate drawing needs to be on a ArcD size paper, 24 by 36. So I'm gonna start my drawing using that paper size and a scale factor when they create a document. And that's fine. It's not the best way to work with Morpholo Trace because Morpholo Trace is so flexible, and I wanna show you ways that you don't need to worry about that from the get-go, because you can always plot it to a different size paper at a different size scale, which we'll talk about in the next section. From the start of the drawing is not something you should get hung up on. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, because I see this pretty often and it's one of the common themes that tend to pop up. And the next one is not so much of a common theme, but it's more about when you're drawing digitally, when you're working digitally, it's a really good idea to take advantage of the layers that you can build in here. So like Photoshop, you can have many layers, but unlike Photoshop, you're capped at 24 layers at least at this moment in Morpholo Trace. So you can see this project right now, it's got about 18 layers. So from that very initial plan, whether that's a PDF or a photo, from this point, there's about 17 layers, including your final drawings, including the time I spent to lay out and conceptualize, including the title block and other information. If you manage your file well, 24 layers is not unreasonable. I do see a lot of people go over that, but it's not unreasonable if you have good practices and if you are going to be managing this well on your end. So I want to just talk about the idea of non-destructive workflow. The idea of non-destructive workflow is you can always revert back to the condition a layer or object started with. So this is not exactly that, but it bears a similar kind of a direction. So the idea that you can have different layers gives you the opportunity to really design and work on your projects with a lot of room to make edits and updates. So as you can see, I'm somewhat careful about the things that I put on a layer. So if I'm drawing the context, right, actually, I'll make this paper a little bit more opaque. So I'll put the context information on one layer because these are the things that may not change depending on what the vegetation or the plant layout, if they change. I also put the plant information, some of the smaller plants, I'll group them into this layer. And then you'll see the tree on top of this, right? These big trees, they're on a layer of themselves, because if I had to take them out or edit them, I don't want to also redraw the things that are below them. So that's the really big idea, is you want to just be cognizant of what layers you draw things on, so to make your life easier down the road. And I'm not prescribing the exact number of layers. I think that's something you can develop on your own. If you can live with even less layers, by all means. So you can see here, I have at least 3 layers for the drawing, and then I have 1 layer for the text in case I want to turn off the text. And so I just really wanted to have that layer by itself. So this is it. So I have 4 layers for the drawing, and I'll show you in terms of the workflow. So I didn't start the drawing like this, right? There's more to it. This is really the finalized version of my drawing. When I start the drawing, it actually looks like this. So you can see this is me using her drawing as the basis to draw over some of these formations. You can be less careful. I guess you don't have to have many layers when you're conceptualizing or you're doing this level of layout, because this is not something that the client will show. This is really for yourself. Like, you're doing the layout in terms of how many plants and the spacing around the site. So this is something that I'm less careful about. You can actually see I've accidentally drew something over to the ground layer, and doesn't really bother me, and it's fine if I make that mistake. But from there onwards, once I'm ready to move on to the next stage, which is inking and coloring and putting on the title block, this is where I will be more careful with the layer management and the sequence of layers. So from this point, this is probably the next step after the layout. And from here, I'll start coloring. You can see the coloring layers actually is a lot more than just the inking layers. So for coloring layers, I've got a layer for the background. I've got layers for just the brick. Oh, actually, they're a little bit opaque because this layer has some transparency on. You can see I have for the planting colors, right? So these are more saturated, and I have a layer for the plants themselves. So these are more homogeneous in their tonality. And I have a layer for the tree. I have a sort of a grease pencil. And this grease pencil is like a technique that I came up with, because if I didn't have that, you can see these layers, they look a little bit flat. So the grease pencil is adding a little bit more depth, and that particular pencil is this one right here. I've found this one probably to be the most realistic out of everything else. By itself, if I just had this layer on by itself, you can see this is the kind of look that this grease pencil is adding to these areas. And I'm very selective because I don't want it to be overwhelming. I want it to be subtle, but you can see that it does make a pretty significant difference when you have it on and when you don't have it on, right? And then the next one is shadow. Shadow is just a layer by itself. And then I also have a layer for a little bit of highlight. So that's just drawing in with a white pen. Very simple to do, but just on a layer of itself in case you want to hide it. And after that, we're pretty much done with our drawings by this point. So the couple of things that you'll see that I have done after is actually just putting a paper texture. So this is a watercolor paper texture, and it's literally just the image, like a scan of a watercolor paper. So if you want to bring it in, it's really easy. We're going to go on this icon tool. We're going to go to the library, and then we're going to go find this water paper texture. And I'm going to just make it big enough to cover the entire site. The key here is changing the blending mode from this normal blending mode to something called multiply. So here it's blending into the texture, it's blending into the drawing, and it just gives you a lot more kind of teeth and texture and noise to a otherwise maybe a little bit flatter look. So this is just something that I do in most of my illustrations, and it's such a quick thing that you can do. And you can see the one I have a larger texture, and that's has to do with resizing the watercolor paper. So we're at a point where we can ideally probably plot this or add the legends in here. I want to show you some special techniques to do with stenciling and building your own potential library. The current stencil isn't very robust, right? What I've done is I've actually gone ahead and developed a lot of stencils. What I call stencils, they're really just a template of plants and species that you can reuse. So one is completely in black and white, the other one is in color. You can actually grab a copy of this on my website. I made this available to everyone. So I'm going to show you how to bring something like this into the drawing so you can save the time of either developing yourself or just redrawing it yourself. We can create our own stencils. It's not too hard. The thing I don't love it about is you can see I've created a bunch of stencils for myself, right? However, it's not transferable. Like if you have a team member or someone that you're working with, I can't just send this to them. I can't export it into a file where they can just load it in. So I would love to just create a stencil and just share it with everyone. That would make everyone's life a lot easier, but I can't. So I'll show you how to make this instead. Just click on this plus icon, and then we're gonna go to the photo library, and we're gonna click on this file. I can't make a stencil out of this entire file. So what I can do is to zoom in on a particular stencil, on a particular plant, let's say for this one. And then you can adjust this tolerance slider right here, make this more to the left because that looks more like my drawing. If you go all the way to the right, it makes the line really thick. So all the way to the left, looks about right. And then I click done. And that's it. You've made your own stencil right here. And now I'm going to zoom in and then just make this about this size. So I can just tap. Now it's in green. You can make it in any colors that you want. This is one way to use a stencil. As you'll notice, this stencil doesn't have any coloring because the stencil option that's available to you doesn't have the ability to bring in the color. So it's just a line weight with a transparent background. So if you want to get colors in here, you actually have to color yourself. What I think is a better way or a faster way to do things, and this is the way I recommend to my own students, is actually bringing in the file that has the coloring already baked in. So it's this file right here. So if we were to do the same thing with this coloring, what I'll do is I will actually just make this a little bit bigger, and then I'll click OK. So again, this is going to be the most top layer. And the idea is I'm going to be using this existing library. I'm going to select this guy right here. I'm going to just double tap to move it to this layer. And then I'm just going to start copying it again a couple of times just to show you how easy it is using this workflow. Now, this particular species is fairly homogeneous in the look. If we had a plant that has a little bit more variation, what you can also do is you can zoom in on this a little bit. When you make a copy, you can rotate it, right? So they kind of overlap. And then I'm going to make another copy right here. And you can flip it horizontally. You can flip it vertically to introduce a little bit of depth and just to make it look visually more dynamic, so it doesn't look like it's cloned over and over again. So these are the things that you can very quickly do without drawing it yourself. See, I personally like to hand draw my things, but I also get sometimes having pre-existing stencils, it just makes everyone's life easier just to have that available. So this is the way to use stencils by either creating your own or bringing it in as a library. Now, this brings us to our last category, which is actually exporting. Let's say we have the drawing in this orientation, and we also want to add in some plant, legend, description, other things that you typically will find on a project sheet. Let's say this is the layer where I have the legend, and you can see if I'm using the method where I'm bringing in my own plant species, I can easily populate this legend sheet from a pre-existing image just to get it to a point where this is the amount of information maybe I want to see on an ArcD size paper or a different size paper. How will this fit and how will this print? And how do I get a title block in here that looks like your own title block? So first, let's go ahead and export this drawing. So I'm going to export it as a PDF, and I'm going to using the layer option. It's going to give you the option to basically export every single layer, which is not what you want. So if you want to just get it to a layer where the information, this view that you want to do, you have to literally turn off all the other layers. So for me, because I have 18 layers, I have to do this 18 times, but you kind of get the gist, right? So I have to find this view because this view is the orientation that I wanted to export the drawing. So you can either select a paper size that you want to fit this on. So you can see here, I already have it on 24 by 36 at a 1/4 inch put it on a different size sheet. So let's say we want to fit this information on a 12 by 18 size. And at a 1/4 inch, this is way too big, right? So what if we try 1/8 inch? Now, 1/8 inch sounds about right, actually. And you can see this title block that you can toggle on. This is the default title block option, which is useful in simple cases where if you just want to type in your ASK number, a name, your name, and your company logo. This might be fine for those kind of scenarios, but if you're actually sending it to a vendor or a contractor, you will need your own title block, customizable, with your logos, address, project number, and etc. Right? So we're not going to be using this one, even though this is available to you. But from here, what we can see is this paper size, this scale factor, we can fit everything that we wanted to in this paper size. And all you need to do right now is just to export it, and you can just save it to your files, your Dropbox. I also want to show you another way by bringing your own title block into this, because that's going to be more useful to you for most people. Let's say in your mind, by working with this kind of projects a lot, you know this will most likely fit on a 24 by 36 inch page. This is going to be 1/4. So this is about the size that will fit. We just need to add in the title block. That's what we're going to do next. This is the size. This is the scale factor. Let's go ahead and bring in a title block that fits into this scale factor. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to out of this project first on the cloud drive. And in the same folder, I'm going to bring this title block 24 by 36 inch ArcD size in here. So clicking on that, with this will prompt me to give it a scale. So remember how the last view that we had, we wanted to be ArcD, but at a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to assign the 1/4 inch to this paper size. Once I do, I will be prompted into this window. And here, I'm going to make a copy of this title block, and I'm actually going to exit. And just going to click OK to save this project. And let's go back to the project that we actually want to print from. So in this view, all we need to do right now is, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit more. All I need to do right now is just to paste in this title block into the orientation that we want. Now, when this title block is brought in, I don't want you to touch anything. I want you to just click on this check mark, because we're going to save that resolution, because this is sized for 1/4 inch. And you can see in here, first of all, you can't see the background behind it, and it's also in the wrong orientation. Easy fix. We're going to put this from normal to multiply, and then we're going to switch this orientation by using the scale and transform in place. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm going to place it just about there. And then I'm going to tap to bring it back into this orientation. So now you have a title block, you have the drawings, and you have your company info. In the scale, you can probably write down the actual scale, which is 1/4 inch, right? And then you have your sheet number. And this will be just a page that you can quickly send off to a client, consultant, builder, and whatnot. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to remember this title block falls on a layer by itself, right? This is a layer by itself, and we're going to find that particular layer when we get to export the drawing. So again, remember how we said we have 18 layers, right? Which is far too of a nuisance to turn off 18 layers, but that's what we're going to have to do here. If you don't, your PDF will have all these layers exported as a drawing. We're down to this one last view of the title block, and we're going to toggle on all layers. Right now, by default, it's 24 by 36, and we're just going to make sure the scale factor is at 1/4 inch. We're going to hit on this check mark, and voila. We're going to export this very quickly. We're going to save it to files, and we're going to save it in today's folder. I'm going to save, and in our file app, I'll find this file. So it's this file right here. You can see that today at 101. So if I just open up this file, you can see the drawing, legend, title block, all the information in a pretty good quality. As you can see, if I zoom in, this is a pretty good quality to print. This paper size, this is this is what you want. I think for most people is to have your own customizable title blocks, right? So I know that's a workaround to doing this, but this is a workaround that I managed to figure out myself. You won't find this in the Morphola Trace manual or workflow. If you think Morphola Trace could be a great addition to your workflow, check out my Morphola Trace playlist right here. Or if you're ready to dive in, grab my free iPad starter kit. It's packed with brushes, templates, and case study files to help you hit the ground running as quickly as you can.